Jordan Peterson was on a podcast with Comment Magazine's Jonathan Pageau. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Pageau?
And writer Gregg Hurwitz. And this seems like Hurwitz apparently is a little critical of Jordan Peterson's recent tweets where he dead named Elliot Page.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
went
and
after
also,
that model on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Oh, right. He was mad because it wasn't his
When he
vision
goes,
of beauty.
yeah,
Not
sorry.
attractive. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, not beautiful.
He was unable to put it in his spank bank. So
That's right.
My
My spank bank runneth dry. Therefore, I am unhappy.
Society is sick.
Society has got an illness that they're putting the girl I'm not attracted to on the Sports Illustrated cover.
The profound narcissism of it is amazing to me.
The narcissism's pretty impressive.
It's
yeah.
kind of like in the top 3 of just
Such a
hilarious.
good-looking guy
But
himself.
here is Jordan Peterson. I would almost say doubling down on his transphobia. I don't know how else to express this. And it really does explain why he has no problem dead naming people, and that he's not just doing this by mistake, that he's doing this because he is ideologically opposed to the recognition or normalization of the concept of transgenderism.
So what you're saying though is that he is being strategic, and when he got suspended from Twitter for dead naming Elliot Page around the same time that his Daily Wire Plus show was launching, which is a total coincidence, that he perhaps was not completely taken aback by said suspension.
Boom, boom.
Shocking. All right, but here he is.
Yeah, right. Well, right.
And
But I don't
Cornell-
think it's reasonable to say that I shouldn't have gone after the trans minor problem because I didn't simultaneously go after the porn problem.
But you
I've gone
didn't go
the
after
porn
a trans
problem to some
minor
degree.
problem in a way that made any sense because you
I don't
denigrate-
know.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Let's say, like, Elliot Page is not a rapid onset gender dysphoria convert who spent too long at Marlborough School in LA.
Maybe.
This
Maybe.
Okay, I don't believe so. We could
And
just
I think you could make a case that he isn't. But
he did it when this was not trendy. He did it when Ellen Page walked away from a lucrative
right,
career.
but people can be unbelievably confused for a very long period of time. And the mere fact that it's been a long time that they've been confused doesn't mean that they've thought it through when they make their decision. And I would say it hasn't been thought through
can
because
anyone-
it wouldn't have been public. That's the thing. It's like, okay,
But
you did
why?
it. No
Everything
problem.
you think through wrong is public. And we're having a whole conversation about the fact that you make mistakes.
Right, but
So
I'm
here's-
not enticing adolescent girls to sterilize themselves.
Okay, but are you enticing when you make that comment about a swimsuit model, young men who worship you and think that you're saint-like to act like pigs to women?
No, but I might be encouraging them to not respect the things I'm saying because I'm being incautious. And I would say even if the
Wait. I mean, we have to, this is just, it is unbelievable. The capacity of this man to say the most inane things in the most obtuse of ways.
Yeah.
So that you're basically left just sort of thinking like, did he say something that was reasonable there? No, actually he said something that was completely pathetic.
And also kind of inscrutable. Like he's saying that the people who follow him should not respect what he's saying if he's saying something incautious. But like, then why say it?
It is, it is irrelevant. I mean, he's basically saying it's irrelevant what I say at any given time if it does not, if it is not something that ends up being appropriate. But in the event that it is, but at other times, my ideas should have prominence. Go back a little bit so that we can get the full gist of this.
Meaning based on, in terms of like the public reaction and what they deem outrageous or acceptable, just make a determination about what I provide for society based on people's reactions. Like, you can't make larger assumptions about my contributions to thought.
Yeah, and also this whole thing, well, you could make an argument that Elliot Page is actually trans. Like, bro, you said you completely rejected that and called the doctor a criminal butcher, right? Like, this idea that you're somewhat, oh, well, it's all up for debate. Like, it's not reality.
What's also amazing is this is a guy who, I don't know if he's still on his all meat diet, but is criticizing people who make these decisions as if they're just doing it on a fad. I mean, the guy put himself into like a coma with his diet, didn't he?
Yeah. Being trans is a fad, but his diet of all meat garbage is like, yeah, you're just returning to being a
all right. Go back
carnivore.
just a little bit more.
Okay,
But
you did
why?
it.
No
Everything
problem.
you think through wrong is public. And we're having a whole conversation about the fact that you make mistakes.
Right, but
So
I'm
here's-
not enticing adolescent girls to sterilize themselves.
Okay, but are you enticing when you make that comment about a swimsuit model, young men who worship you and think that you're saint-like to act like pigs to women?
No, but I might be encouraging them to not respect the things I'm saying because I'm being incautious.
Pause it.
And I would
pause
say-
it. Pause it. Okay, so let me just translate what he said there. The questioner says, okay, you're not, as you say, inspiring women to young women to sterilize themselves, as if it's his business what women are doing anyways, or anybody else is doing with their body. But you are encouraging young boys to look at women with your set of very narrow sense of what is or is not acceptable in terms of being publicly displayed. And you're essentially saying that this woman has less self-worth, less worth because she doesn't fit your physical requirements. And Peterson's response is, I'm not there. The idea that I'm communicating, they're going to ignore that. What they're going to do, these young boys who worship me, who my career is based upon having these boys see me as a guru, instead, what they're going to do in this one unique situation is learn a lesson that I am fallible at moments, perhaps. I mean, just to even utter these words is the hubris and narcissism and delusion that is associated with this. And of course, you say it in that manner because if you were explicit, the guy says, aren't you teaching young boys a bad lesson? I'm like, no, I'm not teaching them a bad lesson. I'm actually giving them a good lesson that sometimes Jordan Peterson, can make mistakes. If he had just said it that clearly, everybody would have been like, what? But he says that he's so elliptical in the way that he responds because he knows he's been caught there. All right, continue.
Even if the
So
first
why not
accusation
same
was true.
with Elliot Page? Okay.
Yeah, but it's the consequences.
Yeah.
Here, it's like, look, you had your psychological problems, whatever they might be. I'm not going to argue about what they are. You rectified them in a very, very dramatic way. And perhaps that was your right. And perhaps it was the right of the surgeons. Although I'm not convinced of either of those things, by the way. It may be the case, but I'm not convinced of it. But then
pause it for 1 second. I want to put a flag there. It may be the case that it is not the right of an individual to transition in any manner, he's saying. They don't have the right of autonomy in this way. Jordan Peterson has the right to eat an all-meat diet if he wants. Jordan Peterson has the right to shoot Botox into his forehead if he wants. Jordan Peterson has the right to do any of these things that have to do with it. In fact, he gets upset when there's a policy at a school that says, don't be rude to your students and use the wrong pronouns. That That's an incredible infringement upon, the idea that I have a professional responsibility to the students I teach. That's an incredible infringement upon my sovereignty. But this guy says you don't have a right to address issues with your gender if that's what you feel you want to do. He's not convinced of it.
And the hubris too of like, you are supposed to, from my tweets and from what I put out into the universe, make a determination or learn lessons and understand my fallibility as a human being and give me the grace to make mistakes and to communicate things inartfully. And yet in the same breath, I am going to say your agency and your self-determination about what you think is right for you is actually wrong because of my interpretation of it from the outside. But the whole outside world is supposed to understand that he's a human being and has weaknesses. Like, I've never seen such a deluded, self-involved prick in my life.
Well, and this conversation is so convoluted because, like, the idea that he's apologetic at all for the model thing, like, no, the subtext he still believes, which is that, like, the wokesters are forcing things on us because of wokeness. And
in fact, he said that. We skipped over it a little bit, but he said even if the underlying thing was not necessarily wrong.
right. But like the thing with like this gets I think the interviewer kind of loses track when Jordan Peterson says like, oh, I'm not sure if Elliot Page is actually trans. It might be this like woke mind virus thing. And his one bit of evidence is that it was public. Like, yeah, Elliot's an actor that everyone is familiar with.
Right.
There's going to be some level of publicity about this. That that's just a ridiculous thing to say. And this is just denial that trans people exist.
Without a doubt. In fact, he gets even more explicit about it.
The right of the surgeons, although I'm not convinced of either of those things, by the way. It may be the case, but I'm not convinced of it. But then you made it not only public, but triumphantly public. I finally found my true self, and I'm a model for emulation. It's like, I don't think so.
Pause it 1 second. When I was growing up, and when I was younger, particularly in the 90s, when there was some abatement of the homophobia that existed during the 80s, some abatement where it wasn't so virulently hostile, you would start to hear people say like, look, I don't care what you do in your own bedroom, but I don't want to walk down the street and see two guys kissing. I don't want to see two guys holding hands. I don't need to have that rubbed in my face. I don't need that type of like, oh, look at us. We're here. We're queer and we're here to stay. I don't need to see that. This is the stages and the phases and the physical, different levels of physical manifestation of transphobia. It's okay. I may think it's legitimate that you have the right to address your feelings of being misgendered. I'm not convinced of it, but I may. But the idea that you would be public about it, that is wrong, is what he's saying.
And it always returns back to what is acceptable for him to give in terms of like, I deem this level of behavior or this level of acceptance of your own identity is acceptable to me. And so I am the ultimate arbiter and gatekeeper of it as well. It just like he's also what he's trying to do there by claiming that there's something nefarious about Elliot Page publicly declaring that he's a trans man it's a way to say Elliot is grooming other young kids and setting an example publicly for what they can do and enticing them to be trans when it just so people understand, if you're a Jordan Peterson fan watching this, being trans in America is not something that's quite easy and not something that people are knocking down doors to participate in, given the climate that someone like Jordan Peterson is creating for people.
Go ahead.
But triumphantly public. I finally found my true self, and I'm a model for emulation. It's like, I don't think so.
Model for
I don't think so.
But if he did, do you believe anyone is trans?
I wouldn't.
Like with all the variations in the world, including some
I know
people-
the answer to that question. Someone comes to me and asks me that question, because people have asked me those questions, and the answer is, we need to talk about it for 5,000 hours. That's the answer.
Okay. So,
Because who knows what someone really is? I mean, none of us know who we really are.
So if it
Do I believe that men can be born in women's bodies? I certainly don't believe that statement is in any way an adequate representation of either the problem set or the solution. Here's an example.
Pause it for 1 second. I don't want what he has just said to be lost in his jibber jabber that he follows it up with, or his sort of like equivocating. He denies the legitimacy of transgenderism. And forget the ism here. He does not think that transgender people exist. He sees it as a mental disorder that is being basically midwifed by overly wokes in our society. That is the reality of this. That is it. Everything else is just jibber jabber commentary. What those two responses that he just gave give the game away for him. It's not that he has a problem with him having to not dead name people. It's not that he has a problem with using the wrong pronouns. It's not that it offends him. It's that he believes they are mentally ill. Period. End of story. Every single person who is transgender is suffering from a mental illness, according to him, that has been enabled by the wokes. That's it. And if that sounds remarkably familiar to anybody my age, in terms of the way that people talked about gay people 20, 30 years ago, it should, because it's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing.
Profoundly ahistorical.
It is ahistorical, and it is exactly the same sort of notion. At one point, being gay was in the American Psychiatrist diagnosis book, or whatever it was. And this guy is part of that tradition. That's what he's saying. Everything else is just bullshit, not that he feels imposed upon, it's that he believes they do not exist. Continue.
So I know the answer to that question. Someone comes to me and asks me that question, because people have asked me those questions, and the answer is, we need to talk about it for 5,000 hours. That's the answer.
Okay.
Because who knows what someone really is? I mean, none of us know who we really are.
So if it
do I believe that men can be born in women's bodies? I certainly don't believe that statement is in any way an adequate representation of either the problem set or the solution. Here's an example. Do you believe that anorexic women who think they're too thin are too thin? Because they sure think they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not see how that's not analogous.
Pause it right there. It's a clinical problem. If you think if you think that you are transgender, if you think that you, it is a clinical, psychological problem.
And you need to be rehabilitated. If it's entirely analogous, as he says, anorexia sometimes can get to a point where a person experiencing it has to get help and has to be hospitalized or has to be treated because they could die. Is that what he's claiming is entirely analogous to trans people?
Continue.
Dangerous.
And we wouldn't have. We don't.
So for me, this is where it taxes to the personal.
Yeah.
Where I have a friend, a family member, who lesbian, working class, Mexican, really funny, really irreverent.
Yeah.
Went through therapy, master's degree, 2 years of therapy.
Yeah.
Calmly decided, huge fan of yours.
Yeah.
Listens to you every night. Went through transition. Only questions that he came to me with were how do I be a better man? Because I always say it's hard enough to be one gender, to do one gender well. Half of us aren't doing it right.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to be gay, and then if you want to switch gender. And to me, in this individual, and I don't want to get into stats and numbers because it's a different argument, and I probably can't keep up.
Yeah.
This person is the fullest embodiment of who he is meant to be, and it's somebody who I know
Maybe.
intimately.
Maybe.
Well, as much as you could judge as much as you are, for me, in my eyes. So whatever my opinion estimation is worth.
Well, okay, that'll switch things into a slightly different argument. I'm willing to accept that because I already
if
said
that's an
this.
acceptance, then again,
Wait a sec. There's
Okay.
there's contingency.
okay.
If in finding your true identity, you violate a cultural norm that's so profound that you destabilize the entire country, the entire culture, then maybe you don't have the right to do that, even if it actualizes yourself.
But
See,
then,
I don't know, right?
But is the manner
Pause it right there. I mean,
Wow.
that's it. That's it right there. Not only now has he argued in this conversation that it is impossible to be transgender, that transgenderism is a mental disease that may or may not be treatable, analogous to anorexia, needs 5,000 hours of therapy, which incidentally is over 200 24-hour days, to be even remotely addressed. And now he's taking it a step further. That not only does not, that transgenderism does not exist, that you don't even have the right to contemplate it. If some force, we don't know what force it is, but in this instance, presumably it is Jordan Peterson, decides that it is disruptive to society. I mean, marriage equality was also disruptive to society, according to people, that it's going to impinge upon my marriage if Steve and Matt get married.
I might have to make a different kind of cake.
If black people can be my boss, this is going to be disruptive of society.
Well, and he also says disrupts the culture or alters the culture. So then when you mention black people there, that's where you see how these things are all connected, which is that right-wingers, reactionaries, white supremacists, whoever they may be, racist, bigots, they all want culture as it is currently constructed to either be static or to, once it is static, return to what it was, a white society ruled by the patriarchy, etc. Like, they want things to either stay the same and progress to be halted, or for things to return to as they were. So they see any kind of progress for groups that are marginalized or aren't the dominant power as a threat to the organism that is culture, which is just like cultural arguments inherently feed into that for right-wingers.